My mother looked me dead in the eye and said she forgot to book my room. My sister laughed and told me to sleep on the floor. My brother-in-law threw his luggage at me like I was the help. I simply turned around and walked out. 1 hour later, while I was sipping vintage Pinot Noir in a private oceanfront villa, my phone blew up with 60 missed calls. Why? Because the police had just arrived at their dinner table. My name is Zara. I am 35 years old, and this is the story of how my family tried to humiliate me, only to find out I owned the very ground they were standing on. Before I continue this story of absolute revenge, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever been the black sheep of your family while bankrolling their lifestyle, hit that subscribe button. You are going to want to hear this. The lobby of the Azure Coast Resort on Hilton Head Island smelled like white tea and old money. It was the kind of place where the silence was heavy, broken only by the soft click of heels on imported Italian marble and the distant sound of a jazz piano. My family stood in a tight cluster near the mahogany check-in desk, looking like a picture-perfect example of black excellence. My father, Desmond, in his linen suit, my mother, Patricia, clutching her designer bag a little too tightly, and my sister, Bianca, with her husband, Kyle, posing for a selfie before we had even received our room keys. I stood a few feet behind them, holding my own bag, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. I had spent the last 10 years making myself invisible to keep the peace, but today, invisibility was about to be forced upon me. The receptionist, a young woman with a tight bun and a sympathetic expression, looked up from her computer screen. Her eyes flickered from my parents to me, then back to the screen. The clicking of her keyboard stopped. "I am sorry," she said, her voice lowered to a professional whisper that carried too well in the quiet hall. "I have the reservation for Mr. and Mrs. Williams in the Grand Suite, and a reservation for Mr. and Mrs. Davis in the Deluxe King. But I do not see a reservation for a Ms. Zara Williams." The air around us seemed to freeze. I looked at my mother. I waited for the gasp, the apology, the flurry of movement to fix a simple mistake. I waited for her to pull out her credit card and demand a room for her eldest daughter. Instead, Patricia Williams just smoothed the front of her silk blouse and looked everywhere but at me. "Oh," she said, her voice light and airy, the same tone she used when she forgot to buy milk, not when she forgot her own child. I must have completely slipped my mind with all the wedding anniversary preparations. My memory is just terrible lately. She turned to the receptionist with a dazzling practiced smile. "It is fine. We will figure it out." I stepped forward, my voice calm but shaking slightly. "Mom, you sent me the itinerary 3 weeks ago. You said everything was handled. You said this was a family trip." My father checked his Rolex, sighing loudly. "Zara, do not make a scene. We have been traveling for 6 hours. Your mother made a mistake. Move on. Move on." The phrase echoed in my head. Move on from missed graduations. Move on from forgotten birthdays. Move on from being the afterthought in a family I had secretly supported for a decade. Bianca chimed in, then linking her arm through Kyle's. She flipped her long, expensive weave over her shoulder and gave me a look that was half pity, half amusement. "Honestly, Zara, it is not a big deal. Our suite has a huge living room. You can just sleep on the sofa." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "It is not like you are not used to roughing it, right? I mean, with those double shifts you pull at the call center, you probably fall asleep in your chair half the time anyway. Besides, this trip is really for the couples. You are just here to help out with the kids, right?" I looked at my sister. The golden child. She believed I worked in customer support for a hotel chain. She believed I lived in a cramped apartment because I could not afford better. She did not know that the call center job was a cover. I used to explain why I was always busy, or that my cramped apartment was actually a penthouse in the city that I owned outright. She saw what she wanted to see. A failure. A servant. "I am not sleeping on a sofa, Bianca," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am 35 years old. If there is no room for me, then there is a problem." The receptionist cleared her throat gently. I am afraid we are fully booked, ma'am. It is peak season. We have absolutely no vacancies remaining in the main hotel. My mother finally looked at me, her eyes hard and cold. Well, there you go. It is settled. Stop being difficult, Zara. You are lucky we even invited you. You know how expensive this place is. Most families would not drag a single childless daughter along on a luxury vacation, let alone offer her a free sofa in a five-star suite. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like ash. Grateful that I paid off their mortgage 2 years ago anonymously. Grateful that I paid for Bianca's tuition. Grateful that I was standing in a lobby wearing a hoodie and leggings while they wore outfits I had essentially paid for. I took a deep breath, preparing to tell them exactly where they could shove their gratitude. But before I could speak, Kyle stepped in. Kyle was my sister's husband, a white man who worked in real estate and tried too hard to fit in with my parents' social circle. He wore a loud Gucci belt that I knew was fake because I knew exactly how much debt they were in. He had a habit of talking down to me that bordered on aggression, always masked as joking. He kicked his large, heavy Louis Vuitton suitcase toward me. It slid across the marble floor and hit the toe of my sneaker with a thud. Look, let us cut the drama, Zara, he said, stepping into my personal space. He lowered his voice, a smirk playing on his lips. His breath smelled like stale coffee and arrogance. We get it, you are embarrassed. But do not make this a whole ghetto scene in the lobby, okay? People are watching. Just grab the bags and bring them up to the room. I will give you $50 for a tip if you unpack them neatly. The world seemed to stop. The background music faded. The chatter of other guests turned into white noise. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Ghetto. He stood there in a resort built on land that my ancestors likely worked on, surrounded by my family, and called me ghetto because I demanded a bed to sleep in. I looked at my father. He was studying the ceiling. I looked at my mother. She was adjusting her earrings. I looked at Bianca. She was scrolling on her phone, bored. They heard him. They all heard him. And they said nothing. In that silence, something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet final sound of a bridge burning down. For years I had held on to the hope that if I just gave enough, if I was just successful enough, if I was just helpful enough, they would see me, they would value me. But standing there looking at the scuff mark on my sneaker from Kyle's bag, I realized the truth. To them, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was an accessory, a utility, a resource to be used and stored away in the closet until needed again. I looked down at the suitcase, then I looked up at Kyle. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not give him the reaction he wanted. I summoned the icy calm that made me one of the most feared investors in the boardroom. I am not a bellboy, Kyle, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a razor. And I am certainly not your maid. Kyle blinked, his smirk faltering for a second before returning. Whoa, calm down. I was just joking. You people take everything so seriously. You people. I turned to my mother. You forgot to book me a room because you never intended for me to have one. You wanted a free babysitter for Bianca's kids so she could get drunk by the pool. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. How dare you speak to me like that? After everything we have done for you, you have done nothing but take, I said, stating it as a fact, not an accusation. But the bank is closed, Patricia. I did not call her mom. I saw the shock register on her face. I turned to the receptionist. Thank you for checking. Since there is no reservation under my name, I will not be staying. Bianca looked up from her phone, her eyes widening. Wait, where are you going? You cannot leave. Who is going to watch the twins tonight? We have dinner reservations at the Palm. Figure it out, I said. You are the mother. Be a parent. I turned on my heel and began walking toward the revolving glass doors. Zara, my father, barked, finding his voice for the first time. If you walk out those doors, do not expect us to let you back in. You are ruining this family vacation. I stopped. I did not turn around. I just spoke loud enough for them to hear. There is no family here, Desmond. Just a group of strangers who share a last name. I pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the humid South Carolina heat. The valet captain, a man I had known for years named Marcus, saw me coming. He immediately stiffened his posture and rushed over, expecting me to hand him a ticket for a rental car. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were not shaking anymore. They were steady. I did not open the Uber app. I opened my contacts and dialed a number that was saved under favorites. "Mr. Sterling," I said into the phone as I walked past the line of taxis. On the other end, the general manager of the Azure Coast Resort picked up on the first ring. "Ms. Williams, we were not expecting you until the board meeting next month. Is everything all right? I am on the property," I said, watching my family through the glass walls of the lobby. They were arguing with the receptionist now, probably trying to bully her into giving them a room. "I need a car," I continued, "and I need the villa." There was a pause, and then the shift in his voice was palpable. "Immediately, Ms. Williams. I will send the private car around to the front. The owner's villa is vacant and ready for you. Shall I have the chef prepare dinner?" "No," I said, watching Kyle kick his suitcase in frustration. "Just wine, a lot of wine, and Sterling." "Yes, Ms. Williams. Cancel the employee discount code attached to the reservation for Patricia Williams." There was a brief silence on the other end. I knew what that code meant. It gave them 80% off the rack rate complimentary breakfast and spa credits. It was a perk reserved for top-tier executives, which I let them use under the guise that I had a friend in HR. "Cancel it," I repeated. "If they ask, tell them the employee who authorized it is no longer available to assist them." "Understood," Sterling said. "Consider it done." I hung up just as a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. The driver, dressed in a crisp black suit, hopped out and opened the rear door for me. I slid into the leather back seat, the cool air conditioning hitting my face. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the hotel entrance one last time. I could see my mother waving her arms, yelling at the poor girl behind the desk. I could see Bianca pouting. I could see Kyle looking around, probably wondering who was going to carry his bags. They had no idea that the price of their room had just jumped from $200 a night to $1,200. They had no idea that their free breakfast was gone. They had no idea that the credit card Kyle was planning to use was about to trigger a fraud alert that would end in handcuffs. I sat back and closed my eyes. The hurt was there, deep and aching, but it was being rapidly replaced by something else. A cold, hard satisfaction. They wanted to treat me like a stranger. Fine. I would treat them like customers. And at the Azure Coast Resort, customers who could not pay their bills were handled very strictly. "Drive," I told the driver. "Take me home." And by home, I did not mean the cramped apartment they thought I lived in. I meant the 6-bedroom oceanfront estate on the north side of the island that I bought with the profits from my first tech exit. The one they did not know existed. The game had just begun. And they were playing checkers while I was playing chess. Back inside the air-conditioned lobby, the air was thick with a different kind of heat. While I was walking away with my head held high, my family was about to face their first reality check of the trip. I knew exactly how this scene would play out, because I knew exactly what was in their bank accounts. Kyle stepped up to the marble counter with the swagger of a man who owned the place, pulling a platinum-colored credit card from his wallet with a flourish. He slapped it down on the counter, giving the receptionist a wink that made her flinch. "Put it all on this," he announced loud enough for the people in line behind him to hear. "We want the best champagne sent up to the room immediately." The receptionist, whose name tag read Sarah, picked up the card with 2 fingers. She did not smile. She swiped the card through the machine. There was a long, awkward pause, followed by a sharp beep that echoed in the silent lobby. She looked at the screen, then back at Kyle. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "The card has been declined." Kyle laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That is impossible. Try it again. It is probably just a security block because we are traveling." "I forgot to call the bank." He tapped his fingers on the marble sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Sarah swiped it again. Another beep. Another decline. Sir, the message says insufficient funds, not a security block, she said, her voice slightly louder this time. Do you have another form of payment? The people behind them started to shuffle and sigh. My father checked his watch again, looking at the floor. Bianca stopped scrolling on her phone and hissed at her husband. Kyle, what is going on? You said you handled the limit. Kyle turned red, his neck bulging against his collar. The machine is broken, he snapped at Sarah. This is ridiculous. Do you know who we are? We are the Williams family. Sarah did not blink. I do not care who you are, sir. The total for the deposit is $15,000. If you cannot provide a valid payment method, I will have to ask you to step aside so I can assist the next guest. The humiliation was palpable. My mother, Patricia, who had spent her entire life curating an image of effortless wealth, looked like she was about to faint. She could feel the eyes of the other guests on her, judging her, seeing through the cracks in their facade. She frantically dug into her Louis Vuitton purse, her hands shaking as she pulled out a stack of cash she had been saving for shopping. Here, she whispered, pushing the bills across the counter. Just take this for the deposit. We will sort out the card later. It was humiliated money, frantic money stripped of all dignity. They had barely checked in and already the cracks were showing. As the automatic doors slid shut behind me, the humid coastal air wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. But for the first time in years, I felt light. I walked to the edge of the curb, ignoring the line of yellow taxis and the shuttle buses packing tourists in like sardines. I stood there for less than 10 seconds before a low hum approached from the left. It was not a taxi. It was a phantom black Bentley Flying Spur, the paint so deep it looked like liquid ink. The car glides to a stop right in front of me, purring like a large cat. Tourists stopped to stare. A couple waiting for their luggage pointed, whispering to each other, wondering what celebrity was about to get in. The driver's side door opened and David stepped out. David had been the head of VIP transport at the Azure Coast for 5 years. He was a man of few words, built like a linebacker, and he knew exactly who signed his paychecks. He walked around the front of the car, ignoring the chaotic scene of families yelling at each other and bellboys dropping bags. He stopped in front of me and bowed his head slightly. Good afternoon, Madame Zara, he said, his voice deep and respectful. It is good to have you back. Thank you, David, I said, handing him my small bag. I did not need to give him directions. He opened the rear door for me and I slipped into the back seat. The interior smelled of expensive leather and sandalwood. As the door closed with a solid, reassuring thud cutting off the noise of the outside world, I looked through the tinted window back at the lobby. Through the glass wall, I could see them, my family. They were huddled together near the elevators, looking miserable. Bianca was pointing out the window at me. I could not hear her, but I knew her face and I knew her voice. I watched her lips move. She was sneering, turning to my mother and probably saying something like, "Look at her. She just blew her entire month's rent on a private car just to show off. She is so irresponsible." My mother shook her head, looking disappointed, likely agreeing that I was trying to live above my means. They created a narrative to make themselves feel better. To them, I was the foolish grasshopper, and they were the wise ants. They had no idea that the car was a complimentary service included in my ownership dividends. They watched the Bentley pull away, convincing themselves that I was making a financial mistake, while they stood there, having just drained their emergency cash to pay for a room they could not afford. The tinted glass slid up, and their judgmental faces disappeared, replaced by the palm trees rushing by. The car did not head toward the main hotel towers where the tourists stayed. Instead, David steered the Bentley toward the north end of the island, away from the noise, the crowded pools, and the screaming children. We drove for about 10 minutes until the road turned from asphalt to crushed white shells. A massive iron gate loomed ahead, flanked by stone pillars and dense privacy hedges that blocked any view from the outside. A sign on the gate read simply, "The Enclave, no entry." This was the part of the resort that did not appear on the brochures. It was a collection of 12 private villas reserved for the ultra-wealthy and the resort stakeholders. There was no reception desk here. There were no keycards. Security cameras scanned the license plate, and the heavy gates swung open silently. We drove through a tunnel of live oaks, Spanish moss dripping from the branches like lace. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The air felt cooler here, the light softer. We pulled up to the circular driveway of Villa Number 4, a sprawling modern structure of glass and white stone perched right on the edge of the dunes. The ocean was visible straight through the house, a vast expanse of blue. Before David could even turn off the engine, the front door of the villa opened. James, the dedicated butler for the residence, stepped out. He was a man in his 50s with impeccable posture and a smile that felt genuine. "Welcome home, Ms. Williams," James said, opening the car door for me. "We received the call from Mr. Sterling. The temperature in the house has been set to 68 degrees, just how you like it." I stepped out onto the crushed shells, taking a deep breath of the salt air. It was quiet, truly quiet. The only sound was the rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore. "Thank you, James," I said, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally begin to dissolve. "I have taken the liberty of opening a bottle of the 1998 Pinot Noir." He continued, walking beside me toward the house. "And I have prepared a light charcuterie board on the terrace. Shall I draw a bath for you as well?" "Yes, James. That sounds perfect." I walked into the villa. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlantic Ocean. The furniture was white linen. The floors were polished concrete. It was a sanctuary, a fortress of solitude. I walked out onto the terrace and picked up the glass of wine James had poured. I took a sip, the complex flavors hitting my tongue. I looked down the coast toward the south where the main hotel towers poked up above the tree line. Somewhere in that concrete beehive, my family was dragging their luggage into a generic room, arguing about money, and blaming me for their misfortune. Here, in the silence of the enclave, I raised my glass to them. To the silence. To the peace. And to the storm that was about to hit them. Because while I was listening to the ocean, their nightmare was just getting started. Back at the front desk, the nightmare for my family was only just beginning. My mother had managed to scrape together enough cash for the initial deposit, but the real blow was about to land. The receptionist, whose name was Sarah, and who I had personally hired for her attention to detail, typed a few commands into her terminal. Her face remained perfectly neutral, but I knew that screen was flashing red. "Mrs. Williams, I am updating your reservation now," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional. "However, I must inform you that the rate code associated with this booking has been automatically removed." My mother, Patricia, blinked, her false eyelashes fluttering. "Removed? What do you mean removed? That was a friends and family discount. My daughter Zara works for your corporate office." Sarah did not look up from the screen. "The friends and family rate requires the employee to be present at check-in and to stay on the property for the duration of the booking. Since Ms. Zara Williams has departed and canceled her portion of the reservation, the discount is no longer valid. The system has reverted your rooms to the standard rack rate for the peak holiday season." My father, Desmond, stepped forward, his face flushing a deep shade of purple. "Fine, whatever. Just tell us the difference. It cannot be that much. We will pay the extra $50. Sarah turned the monitor slightly so they could not see the breakdown, but read the total aloud. The previous rate was $200 per night per room. The current rack rate for a standard suite is $1,200 per night. For 2 rooms over 3 nights, plus the resort fees and taxes, the new total comes to roughly $10,000. The silence that descended on the group was absolute. $10,000. My mother let out a small, strangled sound, like a balloon slowly losing air. $10,000 was not just a number to them. It was a catastrophe. They lived their lives on a precipice of debt, leveraging one credit card to pay off another, leasing luxury cars they could barely fuel, and buying designer clothes to wear to events they could not afford. The $200 rate was the only reason they had agreed to this trip. My sister Bianca was the first to speak, her voice shrill and panic-stricken. "That is robbery! You cannot charge us that. We have a confirmation email." "I am afraid the terms and conditions are quite clear, Mrs. Davis," Sarah replied, not backing down an inch. "You are welcome to cancel the reservation. But I must warn you that since we are within the 24-hour window, you will still be charged for the first night at the full rate." My mother looked around the lobby. She saw a woman she recognized from her church back home, standing near the concierge desk. The woman was watching them. This was the trap of their own making, the trap of black excellence performed for an audience, rather than lived for oneself. Patricia grabbed Kyle by the arm, pulling him into a tight huddle. "We cannot leave," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Mrs. Johnson is over there. If she sees us dragging our bags out of here 5 minutes after walking in, she will post it on Facebook before we even get to the parking lot. Do you know how humiliated I will be? The Jack and Jill Regional Conference is next month. I cannot be the laughingstock of the chapter." Kyle looked at his wife, then at his mother-in-law. He was sweating profusely now, the moisture staining the collar of his expensive polo shirt. "Patricia, I do not have $10,000 available on my personal cards. You know we just put the down payment on the new Escalade." "Figure it out, Kyle," my mother snapped. "You are a businessman, aren't you? Stop acting broke. It is embarrassing. Just pay it, and we will make Zara pay us back when we get home. We will garnish her wages if we have to. She caused this mess, she will pay for it." Kyle looked at the expectant faces of his wife and in-laws. He was cornered. He was a man who had built his entire identity on being the provider, the successful white real estate developer who had swept the beautiful Bianca off her feet. To admit he could not afford this hotel room would be to shatter the illusion he had carefully crafted for 5 years. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wallet made of genuine alligator skin. His hands were trembling slightly as he thumbed past his personal Visa, which he knew was maxed out, and past his debit card, which had a balance of maybe $300. His fingers landed on a sleek gray card. It was the corporate expense card for his real estate firm. The card that was strictly for company purchases. The card that was monitored by the accounting department. He knew using this for a personal vacation was embezzlement. He knew it was a felony. But he also knew that he was the CFO's nephew, and he had always managed to smooth things over before. He just needed to move some money around when he got back on Monday. Just a temporary loan, he told himself. He pulled the card out and slapped it on the counter with a feigned confidence that made my stomach turn as I watched the security footage later. "Here," he said, puffing out his chest. "Put the full amount on this, and authorize an extra $2,000 for incidentals. We do not want to be disturbed by budget issues again." Sarah took the card. She ran it. This time the machine beeped a happy approval tone. "Excellent, sir," Sarah said, printing out the long receipt. "Please sign here." Kyle signed his name, signing away his freedom with a flourish of blue ink. He did not know it yet, but that signature was the final nail in his coffin. He let out a breath of relief, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "See, Patricia," he said, flashing a winning smile that did not quite reach his dead eyes. "Handled. Like I said, no problems. Just a little banking glitch earlier." My mother preened instantly, recovering her composure. She turned to Mrs. Johnson across the lobby and gave a little wave as if nothing had happened. "See," she whispered to Bianca. "That is why you married him. He takes care of business, unlike your sister who just runs away." They took their room keys, their heads held high, walking toward the elevators with the arrogance of people who believe they are untouchable. They thought they had won. They thought money, even stolen money, could fix everything. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. They were not getting the rooms they thought they were getting. The elevator ride up to the 12th floor was silent but heavy with unsaid grievances. Bianca was checking her makeup in the mirrored walls, already preparing her face for the room tour video she planned to post on Instagram. She was imagining a sprawling suite with a wraparound balcony, a jacuzzi tub in the living room, and a welcome basket filled with gourmet chocolates and champagne. After all, that was what I had secured for them the last time they visited, when I was physically present to authorize the upgrade to the presidential level. The elevator dinged, and they stepped out into the hallway. The carpet was a standard beige, patterned with generic palm leaves. It smelled of industrial cleaner, not the fresh lavender scent of the VIP floors. Room 1204. Kyle read from the keycard packet. He swiped the card and the light turned green. Bianca pushed past him, phone camera already recording, ready to shriek with delight. "Hey guys, we just checked into the Azure Coast, and wait until you see our view," she narrated to her imaginary audience. She pushed the door open and stopped dead in her tracks. The room was fine. It was a standard double queen room. There were 2 beds squeezed into a space that felt cramped for 2 people, let alone a family with luggage. The carpet was slightly worn near the entrance. There was no living room, no jacuzzi, no fruit basket, and the view. Bianca rushed to the curtains and threw them open. Instead of the sparkling Atlantic Ocean and the pristine white dunes, she was staring directly at the roof of the resort's industrial laundry facility. Steam vents were chugging out gray clouds, and the noise of the massive HVAC units hummed like a constant headache. Beyond the roof was a sliver of the parking lot where the staff parked their sedans. She dropped her hand, holding the phone. "You have got to be kidding me." "What is it?" my father asked, squeezing into the room behind her with the luggage cart. "Look at this," Bianca shrieked. "Look at this dump. Where is the ocean? Where is the suite? We paid $10,000 for this. This is a closet." My mother sat down heavily on the edge of the nearest bed. The mattress was firm, standard hotel grade, not the cloud-like pillow tops of the suites. "This is unacceptable," she muttered. "Zara promised us the grand suite. She showed me pictures." "She played us," Bianca spat, kicking her suitcase so hard it left a scuff mark on the wall. "That jealous little witch played us. She knew exactly what she was doing. She canceled the upgrade when she canceled the discount. She wants us to suffer." Kyle threw the keycard onto the dresser. "I am going down there to yell at that receptionist." "No," my father said, looking defeated. "Do not. You saw the policy. Standard room. Rack rate. This is what standard looks like." Bianca paced the small space between the bed and the TV stand like a caged animal. "She is laughing at us. I know she is. She is probably sitting somewhere eating a burger thinking she is so smart. Well, she is not getting away with this." She grabbed her phone and opened my contact info. "I am going to blow up her phone until she fixes this. She has to have some pull left. She cannot just abandon us in this motel room." But as she dialed, the call went straight to voicemail. My mother stood up, her face twisting into a mask of pure vindictiveness. "Do not worry, honey. We will handle Zara when we get home. We will make her pay back every cent Kyle just spent, plus damages for emotional distress. But for now, we are not going to let her win. We are the Williams family. We are going to dress up. We are going to go down to the most expensive restaurant in this resort, and we are going to act like we own the place." Kyle nodded, adjusting his collar. "That is right. Let us shower and get out of this box. I need a drink." They unpacked their clothes, filling the tiny closet to bursting. They sprayed expensive perfume to mask the smell of the laundry vents outside. They put on their jewelry and their fake smiles. They were preparing to go to war with a ghost, not realizing that the ghost was actually the landlord, and eviction night was coming sooner than they thought. As they left the room, slamming the door behind them, I took another sip of my vintage wine in the villa, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The peace here was expensive, but watching them squirm was going to be priceless. The water in the infinity pool was perfectly still, blending seamlessly into the horizon, where the Atlantic Ocean met the sky. I floated on my back, letting the silence of the enclave wash over me. Here there were no screaming children, no clinking silverware, and certainly no family members demanding I carry their luggage. It was just the sound of the wind moving through the palmettos and the distant hum of a landscaping crew maintaining the perfection that I paid for. A shadow fell over me, respectful and hesitant. I stood up in the water, slicking my hair back, and swam to the edge where Mr. Sterling was standing. He held a leather portfolio under his arm and a glass of iced tea in his hand, condensation beating on the crystal. He did not look at me with the pity or disdain my family showed. He looked at me with the deference one offers to the person who signs their annual bonus checks. "Good afternoon, Ms. Williams," Sterling said, placing the tea on the poolside table. "I hope the temperature of the pool is to your liking. I had maintenance adjust the heating pump by 2 degrees just before your arrival." "It is perfect, Sterling," I said, climbing out of the water and wrapping myself in a thick Egyptian cotton towel. The resort logo embroidered on it was not just a brand to me. It was an asset. I sat on the lounge chair and Sterling opened his portfolio. He did not ask how my vacation was going. He knew better. He went straight to business. "I wanted to run the final mock-ups for the new golf course expansion by you before the board meeting next month," he said, laying out high-resolution architectural renderings. "As you know, we are facing some resistance from the local zoning committee regarding the dune preservation, but with your strategy of creating a dedicated conservation trust, they seem to be softening." I studied the drawings. They were ambitious. A 18-hole championship course designed to rival anything in the Carolinas. It was a $20 million project, and my vote was the deciding factor. "Move the 14th hole inland by 50 yards, I said, tapping the paper. "If we disrupt the nesting grounds of the sea turtles, the PR nightmare will cost us more than the redesign. And tell the zoning committee that the Conservation Trust will include a scholarship fund for local marine biology students. That should get the mayor on board." Sterling nodded, taking notes furiously. "Brilliant, Ms. Williams. I will have the architects make the adjustments by Monday. Oh, and regarding the situation in the main hotel." He paused, looking up at me over his reading glasses. "The guests in room 1204 have requested a room move 3 times in the last hour. They are claiming the HVAC noise is causing migraines." I took a sip of the iced tea. It was tart and refreshing. "And what is the occupancy rate for standard rooms, Sterling?" "We are at 99% capacity, ma'am. The only available rooms are the ones facing the parking lot or the laundry facility." "Then tell them they are welcome to check out," I said calmly. "But remind them of the early departure fee." Sterling allowed himself a small professional smile. "Understood. I will handle it personally." He gathered his papers and left as quietly as he had arrived. I watched him go, feeling the weight of my reality settle in. My family thought I was answering phones for angry customers complaining about room service. In reality, I was reshaping the coastline of the island. They saw a servant. The world saw a tycoon. The disconnect was not just sad, it was pathetic. I closed my eyes, ready to drift back into the peace of the afternoon, when the silence was shattered by a vibration against the glass table. My phone. The screen lit up with a photo of Bianca, a selfie where she was pouting her lips and wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first car. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it stopped. A moment later, the voicemail notification pinged. I pressed play, putting the phone on speaker so her voice could drift out over the pool deck like a toxic fog. "Zara. Where the hell are you?" Bianca's voice was high-pitched and echoing, likely calling from the bathroom of their cramped hotel room. "We have been looking for you for an hour. Mom is freaking out because she thinks you left the island, but I told her you are just being dramatic. Look, stop sulking. It is unbecoming. We need you to come back to the room right now. Kyle and I have appointments at the spa in 20 minutes and the kids are bouncing off the walls. You promised you would watch them." There was a pause and I could hear her whispering something to Kyle. "And bring some cash when you come back," she added, her tone shifting to that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. "Kyle's cards are acting weird because of the travel alerts, And we need to tip the bellboy. Don't be selfish, Zara. This is a family vacation. Act like family. The message ended with a sharp click. Selfish. The word hung in the humid air. I looked at the phone, feeling a laugh bubble up in my chest. It was a cold, dry laugh. She was calling me selfish because I refused to sit in a hotel room the size of a shoebox and babysit her unruly children while she got a massage I would have ended up paying for. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger requires emotional investment, and my investment account with the Williams family was officially closed. I did not text back. I did not call to explain. I simply tapped the small eye icon next to her name. I scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card. My finger hovered over the red text that said, "Block caller." "Goodbye, Bianca," I whispered. I pressed the button. The contact turned gray. I did the same for my mother, and for my father. And just for good measure, I blocked Kyle's number too, even though I knew he would never call me unless he needed bail money. I set the phone down face down on the table. The silence returned, but this time it felt heavier. It was the heavy silence of a bridge that had finally collapsed into the river. I walked to the edge of the terrace and leaned against the railing, looking out at the endless blue ocean. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long shadows across the dunes. My mind drifted back not to the luxury of today, but to the grind of the last decade. 10 years. For 10 years, I had been the safety net. They did not even know they were walking on. I remembered the day my father had his first heart attack. He had no insurance. He had let the policy lapse to pay for a country club membership he rarely used. I was 25, just starting my first company eating ramen noodles in a studio apartment. When the hospital bill came, it was $40,000. They thought it was a clerical error when the bill vanished. They thought the hospital had a charity program. It was me. I wrote the check that wiped out my entire savings account because I could not bear to see my father stressed. I remembered when my mother's credit cards were about to be sent to collections. She had spent $20,000 on new furniture for the living room just to host a book club. She was crying at the kitchen table, terrified Dad would find out. I paid it off. I told her I won a small lottery scratch-off. She hugged me and said I was lucky. She never asked how I really got the money. She just took it. And Kyle. God, Kyle. He walked around acting like a real estate mogul, but 5 years ago he was unemployed and unhireable because of a DUI on his record. I called in a favor with a developer friend. I put my own reputation on the line to get him an interview. I practically wrote his resume for him. When he got the job, he told everyone at Thanksgiving dinner that he pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He looked right at me and said, "Some of us are just built for success, Zara." I said nothing. I just smiled and ate my dry turkey. Why did I do it? Why did I let them bleed me dry while they treated me like a parasite? I looked down at my hands. They were manicured now, holding a glass of expensive wine. But I remembered when they were rough from typing code until 4 in the morning. I did it because I wanted them to love me. It was that simple and that pathetic. I thought if I fixed their problems, if I smoothed the road for them, eventually they would look back and see me. But they never looked back. They only looked forward at the next shiny thing they wanted, stepping on my back to reach it. They called me the black sheep. The failure. The one who did not fit in because I drove a Honda and wore jeans while they drove leased Mercedes and wore Gucci. They mistook modesty for poverty. They mistook silence for weakness. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. "No more," I said to the ocean. The wind picked up, tossing the sea oats on the dunes. I turned away from the railing and walked back into the villa. The air conditioning hit my face, cooling the heat of the memories. I was done buying their love. If they wanted to survive in the real world, they were about to learn how expensive it truly was. I had spent 10 years building a fortress to protect them. Now I was going to pull up the drawbridge and watch from the tower as the wolves came for them. And the wolves were coming, starting with a $15,000 hotel bill and a fraud alert on a stolen credit card. While I was sipping vintage wine in the sanctuary of the Enclave, my family was preparing to make their grand entrance at Azure, the resort's premier fine dining establishment. They had dressed in their finest vacation attire, with Bianca wearing a white silk maxi dress that she had undoubtedly charged to a credit card she could not pay off, and Kyle sporting a linen blazer that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. They walked up to the host stand with their chins held high, expecting the red carpet treatment that I had quietly arranged for them every year prior. But this year, there was no Zara to make the call. There was no flag on their file marking them as VIP guests of a shareholder. To the maitre d', a man named Jean-Luc, who had zero patience for pretension, they were simply walk-ins during peak dinner rush. I can only imagine the shock on my mother's face when Jean-Luc did not greet them by name or whisk them away to the private alcove overlooking the ocean. Instead, he scanned his tablet, frowned and grabbed 4 laminated menus. He led them past the floor-to-ceiling windows, past the crystal chandeliers, and past the quiet candlelit tables where couples whispered over lobster thermidor. He kept walking until they reached the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Right next to the service station where waiters dumped dirty dishes and the noise of the chefs shouting orders was audible every time the doors swung open, sat a small wobbly table. "This is the only table available for a party of your size without a reservation," Jean-Luc said, placing the menus down before walking away without waiting for a response. My mother looked at the table as if it were covered in insects. The tablecloth was clean, but the location was a direct insult to her perceived status. Every time the kitchen door opened, a blast of hot air and the smell of garlic hit them. "This is ridiculous," Kyle snapped, pulling out his chair with enough force to make it scrape loudly against the floor. "Do they not know who we are?" "We are staying in the hotel." They sat down, radiating hostility. When their server approached a young African-American man named Marcus, who was working his way through law school, Kyle decided to unleash his frustration on the easiest target he could find. "It took you long enough," Kyle said, not even looking up from the menu. "We have been sitting here for 5 minutes. Bring us a bottle of your most expensive champagne and some bread. And try to be faster than you look." Marcus paused, his jaw tightening slightly, but he maintained his professional mask. "Of course, sir. May I see your ID for the alcohol service?" Kyle slammed his hand on the table. "Are you kidding me? Do I look underage to you, boy? Just get the drink." The use of the word boy hung in the air, heavy and ugly. My father looked down at his napkin, uncomfortable but silent. My mother just sighed, fanning herself with the menu. Bianca giggled nervously. They let Kyle's disrespect slide because they needed him to pay for dinner. They needed his bravado to mask their own insecurity. They did not see the dangerous glint in Marcus' eyes as he walked away. They did not understand that in a place like Azure, the staff talks, and the service you receive is a direct reflection of the respect you give. While Kyle was busy berating the staff to cover up the fact that his hands were shaking every time he looked at the prices on the menu, another disaster was brewing right under their noses, or rather under their table. Usually during family dinners, I was the designated babysitter. I was the one who brought coloring books, iPads with headphones and quiet snacks to keep Bianca's twin boys Jackson and Leo occupied. I was the one who took them for walks when they got restless so Bianca could enjoy her meal. But I was not there. Bianca was too busy taking selfies with her empty wine glass to notice that Jackson had crawled under the table. My mother was too busy scanning the room to see who else was dining there to notice Leo sliding off his chair. Without my supervision, the twins were bored, and bored 6-year-olds in a fine dining restaurant are a ticking time bomb. It started with a game of tag. Jackson poked Leo and ran toward the center of the room. Leo squealed and chased after him. "Bianca, get your kids," my father muttered, but he made no move to get up. "They are fine, Dad, let them play," Bianca said, not looking up from her phone. "They are just expressing themselves." The boys darted between the tables, weaving through the legs of waiters carrying heavy trays of steaming seafood. Guests stopped eating to watch annoyance rippling through the dining room. A woman at a nearby table pulled her purse closer. A man frowned and signaled for the manager. But the boys were fast fueled by sugar and the lack of discipline. They picked up speed, giggling as they rounded the corner near the wine cellar display. At that exact moment, the head sommelier was pushing a heavy mahogany cart toward a table of investors. On the top shelf of the cart, resting on a velvet pillow, was a bottle of Chateau Margaux vintage 1990. It was a rare, dusty bottle that had been ordered by a table celebrating a merger. I can picture it in slow motion. Jackson looking back at his brother, laughing. The sommelier turning the corner, the inevitable collision. Jackson slammed full force into the side of the cart. The heavy wood teetered. The sommelier lunged to catch it, but he was too late. The cart tipped. The 1990 vintage bottle slid off its velvet pillow. It did not just fall. It launched into the air, spinning end over end. Time seemed to stop in the restaurant. The chatter died down. The clinking of silverware ceased. Every eye in the room was fixed on that bottle. It crashed onto the marble floor with the sound of a gunshot. Glass exploded outward in a glittering shower. Dark, rich red wine sprayed in a wide arc, covering the legs of the sommelier, the pristine white tablecloth of the nearest table, and most disastrously splattering all over Bianca, who had just stood up to finally scold her sons. Her scream pierced the silence sharper than the breaking glass. My dress, my white dress. She stood there horrified as the crimson liquid soaked into the expensive silk, looking like a gruesome crime scene. The smell of aged grapes and alcohol filled the air instantly. Jackson and Leo stood amidst the wreckage, looking at the puddle of wine and shattered glass, finally silent, finally terrified. The entire restaurant was dead silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was Bianca gasping for air and the drip, drip, drip of wine falling from the edge of the cart onto the floor. It was the kind of humiliation my mother had spent her entire life trying to avoid, and now she was sitting in the center of it, bathed in the scent of catastrophic failure. The silence was broken by the sharp click of dress shoes on marble. The restaurant manager. Mr. Laurent did not walk over to them. He marched. He was a man who took his wine collection more seriously than his own family, and he looked down at the shattered bottle with the expression of someone looking at a corpse. He did not ask if the children were okay. He did not apologize for the mess. He signaled to a busboy to clear the glass, then turned his icy gaze to Kyle. "Sir, Mr. Laurent," said, his voice dangerously low. "Please control your children immediately." Kyle, already on edge and embarrassed, tried to bluster his way out of it. "Hey, watch your tone. It was an accident. Your guy shouldn't have been pushing that cart so close to the walkway." Mr. Laurent did not blink. "That is a 1990 Chateau Margaux. It is one of only 3 bottles we had in the cellar. So what?" Kyle scoffed, grabbing a napkin to dab at his blazer. "Put it on the bill. We will pay for the spilled milk. Or wine. Whatever." Mr. Laurent pulled a small notepad from his pocket, scribbled a number, and ripped the page out. He placed it on the table face up. "It is not milk, sir. The bottle is listed at $3,500. The cleaning fee for the imported marble and the disruption to the other guests is an additional $300. He tapped the paper with his pen. "The total is $3,800. And per our policy on destruction of property, this amount is due immediately, not at the end of the meal. Now." The color drained from my mother's face so fast she looked like a ghost. Kyle stared at the piece of paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. $3,000, Kyle stammered. "For a bottle of vinegar? You are trying to scam me. I assure you the price is non-negotiable," Mr. Laurent said, crossing his arms. "I can call the police to file a report for property damage if you prefer to dispute it with them." The police. The word hung over the table like a guillotine. They could not deal with the police, not with Kyle's record, not with the precarious house of cards they were living in. Bianca stopped crying about her dress. She looked at Kyle, then at her mother. "Do something, Mom," she hissed. Patricia Williams, the matriarch, who always had a plan, looked down at her hands. She had $200 in her purse. Desmond had maybe $300. They were short by over $3,000. She did the only thing she knew how to do when reality became too heavy to carry. She reached for her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it once before picking it up. She dialed my number. I can imagine her praying as it rang. Please pick up Zara. Please save us. Please be the fool we need you to be one more time. But in the villa, my phone lay face down on the table, silent. At the restaurant, the call went to voicemail. The automated voice said, "You have reached Zara. I am currently unavailable." My mother lowered the phone, terror filling her eyes. "She is not answering," she whispered. Mr. Laurent tapped his foot. "Sir, madam, the card. Now." Kyle looked at his wife, then at the bill, and then a desperate, dark idea formed in his eyes. He remembered the secret he had in his wallet. The secret that belonged to me. The restaurant manager, Mr. Laurent, did not move a muscle as Kyle handed over the gray corporate credit card. His expression was one of bored detachment, the look of a man who had seen people try to buy their way out of embarrassment 1,000 times before. Kyle's hand was shaking so visibly that he nearly dropped the card onto the little black tray. "Please," Kyle stammered, his voice losing all its earlier bravado. "Just run it. It will go through." Mr. Laurent took the card and walked over to the portable terminal at the service station. The table held its breath. My mother was clutching her pearls so hard I am surprised the string did not snap. Bianca was dabbing at the red wine stain on her dress, sniffling, but her eyes were glued to the machine. My father was staring at the tablecloth, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. We watched the manager insert the chip. We waited for the processing circle to spin. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And then the sound that every person living beyond their means dreads. A sharp, angry buzz. Mr. Laurent pulled the card out and walked back to the table. He placed it down with a click that sounded like a judge's gavel. "Declined," he said simply. "The bank has flagged the card for suspicious activity." Kyle's face turned a shade of gray that matched the card. "No, that is wrong. Run it again. It is a corporate account. It has a $50,000 limit. It has been declined." "Sir." Mr. Laurent repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "And frankly, given that you are using a company card for a family dinner on a Friday night, I am not surprised the fraud department intervened." He looked at my father. "Perhaps another member of the party can settle the bill." Desmond Williams, the man who liked to lecture me on fiscal responsibility, opened his wallet. He dug through the pockets. He pulled out a few crumpled $20 bills and a debit card that I knew was linked to an account with less than $500 in it. I do not have that kind of cash on me," my father muttered, avoiding eye contact with the manager. "We usually put everything on the room." "We cannot charge damage fees to the room when the card on file for the room has also been declined," Mr. Laurent said, delivering the final blow. He checked his watch. "I have a business to run and other guests to attend to. You have consumed $300 worth of food and destroyed a $3,500 bottle of wine. I will give you exactly 10 minutes to produce a valid form of payment. If you cannot, I will have resort security escort you to the local police station to answer for theft of services and destruction of property. 10 minutes. The timer started. The air around the table grew thick with panic. My mother started crying, actual tears this time. "Kyle, do something. You cannot let us go to jail. Think of the children. Think of my reputation." Kyle sat there breathing hard. The alcohol he had consumed earlier was mixing with the adrenaline, making his mind race. He was cornered. If the police came, they would run his name. They would see his prior record. They would call his employer about the attempted use of the corporate card. He would lose his job. He would lose his lease. He would lose everything. He looked around the restaurant, desperate for a lifeline. His eyes darted from his weeping wife to his terrified children, and finally they landed on his own wallet lying open on the table. Buried deep in the back slot behind his driver's license and his gym membership was a sliver of black metal. He remembered it suddenly. The memory hit him like a bolt of lightning. Last week. He had borrowed my car to move some boxes because his leased BMW was too small. He had been digging between the seats for loose change when his fingers brushed against something cold and hard. He had pulled it out. It was an American Express Centurion card. The black card. The kind of card you do not apply for, you are invited to. It had my name on it. Zara Williams. He had meant to tell me. He had meant to give it back. But then he had looked at it, feeling the weight of the titanium in his hand, feeling the power it represented. He had slipped it into his wallet, telling himself he would return it later. Just holding it made him feel rich. And now it was the only thing standing between him and a jail cell. He looked at the manager who was tapping his foot. He looked at the card in his wallet. It was a risk. A massive risk. If they checked the ID, he was dead. But they were desperate. They just wanted the money. And Kyle and I shared a last name. Williams. Kyle took a deep breath. The alcohol gave him a surge of reckless courage. "Wait," he said, his voice raspy. "I just remembered. I have a backup card. I keep it for emergencies. It is a family account." He reached into his wallet, his fingers trembling as they pinched the black metal. He pulled it out slowly. The lighting in the restaurant was dim, but the card seemed to absorb what little light there was. It was sleek, matte black, with the centurion head in the center. My mother stopped crying. Bianca stopped sniffling. They stared at the card. They had seen these in rap videos and movies, but never in real life. Kyle handed it to Mr. Laurent. "Try this," he said, praying that the tremor in his hand wasn't too obvious. Mr. Laurent's eyebrows shot up. His demeanor changed instantly. He knew what that card was. He knew that the person who carried a Centurion card did not worry about $3,000 bills. They worried about $3 million acquisitions. He picked it up, feeling the weight of the metal. He glanced at the name, Williams. He looked at Kyle. "Very well, Mr. Williams," Laurent said, assuming the card belonged to the man in front of him or a very close, very wealthy relative. "Let us see." He walked back to the machine. Kyle held his breath. He squeezed his eyes shut. Please, he thought. Please let it work. Please don't let her have reported it yet. Please let the limit be high enough. He did not know that Centurion cards do not have preset spending limits. He did not know that I used that card to buy servers for my data centers. Mr. Laurent inserted the card. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then, approved. The machine spit out a long white receipt. Mr. Laurent walked back to the table a completely different man. He placed the receipt and a pen in front of Kyle with a polite bow. "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir," he said smoothly. "The transaction has cleared. Thank you for settling this matter." Kyle let out a breath that sounded like a tire bursting. He slumped back in his chair, laughing nervously. "I told you," he said to the table, his voice shaking with relief. "I told you I had it handled." He signed the receipt quickly, scribbling a signature that was an illegible mess, terrified that if he signed his own name too clearly, it would flag the system. He grabbed the card and shoved it back into his wallet as fast as he could, as if it were burning his skin. My mother let out a gasp of relief, pressing her hand to her chest. "Oh, thank God. Kyle, why did you not use that in the first place? You nearly gave me a heart attack." Bianca looked at her husband with wide eyes. "Kyle, where did you get a black card? Those are for celebrities." Kyle took a swig of water, trying to wash away the taste of fear. It is a joint account," he lied, improvising rapidly. "Zara gave it to me to hold on to for emergency expenses for the kids." My father frowned. Zara has a black card." Bianca let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Zara, are you kidding me? She drives a 5-year-old Honda. She shops at discount outlets. There is no way she qualifies for that card." My mother narrowed her eyes, her mind already spinning a new narrative to make sense of the world. "Well, you know she has been disappearing on weekends lately, and she has those new earrings." She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You do not think she is seeing someone, do you? An older man. Maybe a married man." Bianca snorted. "A sugar daddy. Oh my God, that makes perfect sense. That is why she has been so secretive. That is why she could get us the discount initially. She is probably sleeping with some executive at the hotel chain." They all laughed. The tension broke. The fear of prison was replaced by the comfort of judgment. "That explains everything," Kyle said, regaining his arrogance now that the danger had passed. "She is playing the mistress, and she gave me the card to keep me quiet. Well, joke is on her. She just bought us a very expensive bottle of spilled wine." They gathered their things, leaving the mess on the floor for the staff to clean up. They walked out of the restaurant feeling superior, feeling safe, feeling like they had gotten away with it. They did not know that miles away in the quiet of my villa, my phone had just lit up with a notification. Transaction approved. $3,800. Azure Fine Dining. Card not present. I looked at the notification. I looked at the location. And I smiled. Because they thought they had just solved their problem. But in reality, Kyle had just signed his own arrest warrant. He had just committed credit card fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny in a single swipe. And unlike the broken wine bottle, this was a mess they could not just walk away from. The night air at the villa was cooling down, settling into a comfortable silence that felt worlds away from the chaotic dinner my family was enduring. I had just finished my glass of wine and was considering heading inside to read a book when my phone screen lit up against the darkness of the patio table. It was not a text message or a missed call this time. It was a push notification from my banking application, the one linked specifically to my high-asset portfolio. The screen glowed with a singular damning alert. Authorization approved. $3,800. Azure Fine Dining. Card not present. I stared at the numbers, letting the reality of what just happened wash over me. I knew that card. It was the heavy titanium Centurion card I had misplaced a week ago. I had torn my apartment apart looking for it eventually, assuming I had dropped it between the seats of my car or left it in a jacket pocket. I never once suspected that it had been sitting in my brother-in-law's wallet the entire time. Kyle had stolen it. There was no other explanation. He had found it in my car when he borrowed it to move boxes, and instead of returning it like a decent human being, he had kept it. He had kept it as a trophy, a safety net, or perhaps he just liked the way it felt to carry something that valuable. And now, pushed into a corner by his own arrogance and inability to pay for his mistakes, he had used it. He had committed a felony to pay for a bottle of spilled wine. I looked at the timestamp. 1 minute ago. He was probably sitting there right now, sighing in relief, wiping sweat from his forehead, thinking he had pulled off the heist of the century. He likely told my parents he handled it playing the big shot while using my money to clean up his mess. The audacity was breathtaking. He stole from me, the person he called ghetto, to save himself from the consequences of his own entitlement. I did not feel angry. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. This was theft. And in the world of high finance where I operated, theft was not met with a scolding. It was met with immediate, merciless liquidation. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the call button. A part of me, the old Zara. The Zara who wanted to be loved, thought about calling him. I could scream at him. I could demand he Venmo me the money immediately. I could tell him to cut the card up. If I did that, the crisis would be averted. He would not go to jail. My family would continue their vacation grumbling about my attitude, but safe. But then I remembered the lobby. I remembered the way he kicked his suitcase at me. I remembered him calling me a bellboy. I remembered my mother watching it happen and saying nothing. I remembered 10 years of being the doormat. If I saved him now, I would be saving him forever. I would be teaching him that he could steal from me, And the worst that would happen is a stern lecture. I looked at the ocean, dark and vast. No. Not this time. The bank is closed. I unlocked my phone and opened the American Express app. The interface was sleek and responsive. I navigated to the card management section. There it was, the active card ending in 4009. I tapped on the image of the black card. A menu slid up from the bottom of the screen. Freeze card. Report lost or stolen. I did not hesitate. I did not tremble. I tapped report lost or stolen. The app asked me to confirm. Are you sure you want to report this card as stolen? This will immediately decline all future transactions and alert authorities if the card is attempted to be used again. I pressed confirm. The screen loaded for a split second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Card deactivated. Fraud alert logged. But I was not done. A digital report was not enough for what Kyle deserved. I opened my messaging app and scrolled to a contact named Chief Henderson. He was the head of security for the entire resort, a former military police officer who took his job very seriously. I typed a message. Urgent. I just received a fraud alert on my personal Centurion card. The transaction originated from the main restaurant Azure Table 12. The individual using the card is not authorized. He has stolen my identity and my property. Please execute full protocol for credit card fraud and grand larceny. Do not let him leave the premises. I hit send. The message marked as delivered instantly. 3 dots appeared as Henderson began typing back immediately. Copy that, Ms. Williams. We are moving in. I set the phone down. It was done. I had just dropped a guillotine and all I had to do was wait for gravity to do the rest. Back at the restaurant, the mood had shifted from panic to celebration. Kyle was practically beaming the adrenaline of his successful deception, making him feel invincible. He signaled for the waiter, Marcus, to bring the check for the tip, scribbling a generous $50 on the receipt as if the money were actually his to give. My mother was fanning herself, regaining her color. That was a close call, she said, reaching for her purse. I am just glad it is over. Let us go back to the room and order room service dessert. I need something sweet to settle my nerves. Bianca stood up carefully, gathering her wine-stained dress to hide the worst of the damage. I am going to sue this place for ruining my outfit, she muttered, but she lacked her usual fire. They were all just eager to escape the scene of the crime. They pushed back their chairs, laughing about how they would tell their friends back home about the clumsy sommelier already rewriting the story to make themselves the victims. Kyle led the way, puffing out his chest, walking toward the exit with a swagger that was entirely unearned. They passed the dessert cart. They passed the maitre d' stand. They were 10 feet from the glass double doors that led to freedom. They were smiling. And then the doors did not open. Instead, they were blocked. 4 men stood there. They were not the slender waiters in white coats. These men were wide, wearing dark gray tactical uniforms with the resort security logo emblazoned on their chests. They stood with their hands clasped in front of them, forming a human wall. Kyle stopped short, nearly bumping into the chest of the lead officer. "Excuse me," Kyle said, trying to step around them. "You are blocking the exit." The lead officer, a man with a shaved head and a gaze like steel, did not move. "Sir, we need you to step back into the waiting area." Kyle laughed nervously, looking back at his family. "Is this about the wine? We paid for it. I have the receipt. It is settled." The officer stepped forward, closing the distance. "This is not about the wine, sir. We have received a report of a stolen credit card used to pay for this transaction. We need to see the card you just used and a valid form of identification that matches the name on the card." The air left the room. My mother let out a small squeak. Bianca froze. Kyle's face went from flushed to pale white in a heartbeat. He stammered, his hands shaking as he instinctively covered his back pocket. There must be a mistake. It is my card. It is a family card." The officer extended his hand. Then you will have no problem showing it to us. Hand it over. Now. Kyle looked around. Other diners were watching. The silence was back heavier than before. Slowly, painfully, he reached into his wallet and pulled out the black card. The officer took it. He looked at the name embossed on the front. Zara Williams. He looked at Kyle. This card belongs to a Ms. Zara Williams. Are you Ms. Williams? Kyle swallowed hard. No, she is my sister-in-law. She gave it to me. She said I could use it. It is authorized. The officer tapped his earpiece. Dispatch, I have the card. I have the suspect claims authorization. Confirm status with the owner. He paused, listening to a voice in his ear that only he could hear. I was the voice on the other end of that chain of command, or rather my text message was. The officer's eyes narrowed. Negative. The owner has reported this card stolen and filed a fraud alert. She states no authorization was given to any male subject. Before Kyle could invent another lie, the glass doors opened behind the security guards. Two uniformed police officers from the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department walked in. They did not look like customer service agents. They looked like law enforcement. They walked straight up to Kyle. The music in the restaurant seemed to stop. Mr. Kyle Davis, the police officer, said, reaching for his belt. You are under arrest for credit card fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Kyle panicked. Wait, no, you cannot arrest me. I am a businessman, Mom, tell them. Bianca, say something. But Bianca was screaming now, a high-pitched wail of denial. Mom, do something, he is going to jail. My mother stood frozen, her mouth open, unable to process that her son-in-law, her symbol of success, was being manhandled by police in front of the very people she tried to impress. The officer spun Kyle around and shoved him against the wall. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight, click, 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 echoed through the dining room. It was a sharp mechanical sound that signaled the end of their delusions. Kyle was hauled away, kicking and pleading, tears streaming down his face, leaving my family standing in the wreckage of their reputation, watched by every wealthy patron in the room. The trap had not just snapped shut, it had crushed them. The handcuffs clicked shut around Kyle's wrists with a sound that was final and terrifying. It was the sound of a life unraveling in real time. He was still shouting, trying to twist his body around to look at the officers, desperate to make them understand that this was all just a big misunderstanding among family. I am her brother-in-law. He screamed, his voice cracking and echoing off the high ceilings of the restaurant. We are staying in room 1204. Just call the room. This is a mistake. You have to believe me. But the police officers did not care about his claims of relation. To them, he was just another suspect caught red-handed with stolen property, trying to talk his way out of a felony charge. The officer, gripping his arm, jerked him forward, forcing him to walk toward the exit. That is enough, sir, the officer said, his tone bored and practiced. You can explain your family tree to the judge. Right now, you are being detained for credit card fraud and identity theft. Kyle's face was a mask of sheer terror. He looked back at the table where his wife and in-laws stood frozen. Mom, he wailed, sounding like a child. Bianca, do not let them take me. I did not do anything wrong. I just borrowed it. Tell them I just borrowed it. Bianca finally snapped out of her shock. She let out a high-pitched scream that made several diners cover their ears. She scrambled past the overturned cart and the puddle of expensive wine, ignoring the glass shards that crunched under her heels. She ran toward the officers, grabbing at the sleeve of the policeman holding her husband. Stop it! She shrieked, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. You cannot arrest him. He is a father. He is a businessman. Let him go right now. Do you know who we are? The second officer stepped in between Bianca and his partner, holding up a hand. Ma'am, step back. Do not interfere with an arrest, or you will be joining him in the back of the squad car. Step back now. Bianca recoiled as if she had been slapped. She stood there trembling, watching as they shoved Kyle through the glass doors. Outside, the red and blue lights of the police cruisers flashed rhythmically, illuminating the shocked faces of the valet staff and the guests waiting for their cars. People inside the restaurant had their phones out recording every second of the humiliation. This was not just a private family matter anymore. This was viral content in the making. The downfall of the Williams family was being live-streamed to the world. Back inside, my mother, Patricia, realized that her shouting was not working. The manager looked at her with disdain, and the other guests were whispering and pointing. She decided to play her last card, the one she always used when she needed sympathy. She clutched her chest, let out a dramatic gasp, and crumpled to the floor in a theatrical faint. She landed carefully on the carpet, making sure not to hit her head, expecting the staff to rush over with smelling salts and apologies. But nobody moved. The restaurant manager simply looked down at her and signaled to a busboy. "Please call the paramedics," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "and ensure they bring the bill for the ambulance service to this table as well." Hearing the word bill, my mother's eyes fluttered open. She realized no one was buying her performance. She sat up slowly, looking around with a dazed expression that fooled no one. The humiliation was total. Her son-in-law was in a police car. Her daughter was hysterical. Her husband was staring at the floor, defeated. And she was sitting on a restaurant floor, surrounded by strangers who looked at her not with envy, but with pity and disgust. Miles away in the villa, the silence of my evening was shattered by the angry buzzing of my phone. It started as a single vibration, a text message notification, but within seconds it transformed into a relentless, continuous drill sound against the wooden table. It was as if the phone itself was having a seizure. I did not need to look at the screen to know what was happening. The shock had worn off and the panic had set in. They had realized that there was only one person who could stop this train wreck, and that was the person they had spent the last 3 hours insulting. I picked up the phone not to answer it, but to watch the show. The screen was a blur of notifications. Missed call from Mom, missed call from Bianca, missed call from Dad, missed call from Mom again. It was a digital assault. I swiped open the message thread to see the evolution of their desperation. The first few texts were demanding, written in the heat of the moment right after Kyle was dragged out. My mother had texted, "Pick up the phone right now, Zara. This is not funny. Tell the police to let him go. You are going to ruin this family." Bianca had followed up with, "You petty witch. How could you report the card stolen? You knew he had it. Call the station and drop the charges immediately, or I swear to God I will never speak to you again." I read them with a blank expression. Even in their darkest hour, their first instinct was to attack me. They still believed they had power over me. They still thought they could bully me into submission. But as the minutes ticked by and I did not respond, the tone shifted. They must have realized that I was not afraid of their threats anymore. The reality of a jail cell and a felony record was sobering them up. The next batch of messages came 5 minutes later. "From my father, Zara, please. Your mother is having heart palpitations. Kyle is in serious trouble. We do not have the money for a lawyer. Just answer the phone so we can work this out." From Bianca. "I am sorry, okay. I am sorry about the room. I am sorry about what Kyle said. Please just pick up. They are taking him to the county jail. He is crying, Zara. He is scared. Please help us." Then the voicemail started rolling in. I watched the transcription feature on my phone convert their frantic sobbing into text. "Zara, it is Mommy. Please, baby. I know we were hard on you. But family sticks together. You cannot let them keep him. He has a record, Zara. If he gets a felony, he loses his license. They will lose the house. Please just call the chief of security and say it was a misunderstanding. We will pay you back. I promise. Pay me back." The phrase made me laugh out loud in the empty room. They had never paid me back for anything in their lives. Not for the loans, not for the dinners, and certainly not for the emotional damage. They were bargaining with currency they did not have. The phone continued to buzz. 50 calls, 55, 60. It was vibrating so hard it was moving across the table, inching toward the edge. It was a desperate electronic heartbeat of a family in cardiac arrest. I watched the names flash on the screen. Mom, Bianca, Dad, Mom, Mom, Mom. Each vibration was a demand for my labor. Each ring was a request for me to fix a mess I did not make. For 35 years I would have answered. I would have sighed, swallowed my pride, and made the call to fix it. I would have been the hero they resented. But tonight I was the villain they created, and the villain was busy. I reached out and picked up the phone. It was hot to the touch from the constant activity. On the screen, Bianca was calling again. I could picture her face blotchy and tear-streaked, holding the phone with a death grip, praying for her big sister to save the day. I did not swipe green. I did not swipe red. I pressed and held the power button on the side of the device. The screen asked me to confirm shutdown. I tapped yes. The light from the screen faded to black. The buzzing stopped instantly. The room was plunged back into a beautiful, heavy silence. I set the black brick of glass and metal down on the table. It looked harmless now, just an object. It could not hurt me. It could not demand things from me. It could not transmit their toxicity into my sanctuary. I stood up and walked into the bedroom where the resort's mobile spa team was waiting. The massage therapist, a woman with kind eyes and strong hands, had set up a table near the balcony door where the ocean breeze could drift in. She had a basin of hot stones warming in the corner, filling the room with the scent of lavender and basalt. "Is everything all right, Ms. Williams?" she asked softly, noticing the tension in my jaw. "Everything is perfect," I replied, untying my robe and lying face down on the plush table. "I just had to take out the trash." I closed my eyes as she placed the first hot stone on the center of my back. The heat radiated through my skin, melting away the knot of stress that had lived between my shoulder blades since I was a child. I focused on the sound of the waves. I focused on the warmth. I did not think about Kyle sitting in a holding cell, stripped of his belt and shoelaces, surrounded by actual criminals. I did not think about my mother and Bianca huddled in the hotel lobby, shamed and penniless. I did not think about my father staring at his hands, realizing his retirement fund was about to be drained for legal fees. Or perhaps I did think about them. But for the first time in my life, I thought about them with indifference. This was the price of admission to the Zara Williams show. They had bought the ticket with years of neglect and disrespect. Now, they were watching the feature presentation. This is what peace feels like, I told myself, as the therapist worked the tension out of my shoulders. And it was worth every single penny. Here is the continuation of the script written specifically for an AI voiceover, with a continuous emotional flow focusing on Part 9 as requested. The fluorescent lights of the Beaufort County Sheriff Department interrogation room buzzed with a low, irritating hum that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. Kyle sat on a metal chair that was bolted to the floor, his expensive linen blazer wrinkled and stained with sweat. The arrogance that he wore like a second skin at the resort was gone, replaced by the trembling fear of a man who had never faced a consequence he could not buy his way out of. Across the metal table sat Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a folder thick with evidence. Kyle was rambling, his words tumbling out in a desperate stream of consciousness. "You have to listen to me," he pleaded, his hands cuffed to the table bar. "This is all a huge mistake. Zara is my sister-in-law. We are family. She probably just forgot she gave me the card. If you just let me call her, she will clear this all up. She loves me. She loves us." Detective Miller did not look up from the file. He flipped a page, the sound loud in the small room. "We have already spoken to Ms. Williams," the detective said, his voice flat and unimpressed. "She has provided a sworn statement. She confirmed that she did not give you the card. She confirmed that she did not authorize any transactions. And she confirmed that she wishes to press charges to the fullest extent of the law." Kyle felt the blood drain from his face. "No," he whispered. "That is impossible. She would not do that. She is just mad because we did not get her a room. She is trying to scare me. It is working okay. Tell her it worked." "I am scared." Detective Miller leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "This is not a scare tactic, Mr. Davis. You are being charged with identity theft in the first-degree credit card fraud and grand larceny. In the state of South Carolina, given the amount you charged, you are looking at significant prison time. Mandatory minimums apply. Kyle began to hyperventilate. The reality of prison, of losing his freedom, of being stripped of his false status, crashed down on him. He looked at the mirror on the wall, seeing his own reflection, and the facade of the successful businessman cracked wide open. Then the weeping started. It was not a dignified cry, it was the ugly, snotty sobbing of a coward. "I cannot go to jail," he blubbered. "I have a reputation." And then, as is the nature of weak men, he started looking for someone else to blame. "It was not my idea," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It was Bianca, my wife. She pressured me. She is the one who wanted the expensive dinner. She is the one who needed the wine. She is always spending money we do not have. She drove me to this." Detective Miller raised an eyebrow, looking at the man who was willing to throw the mother of his children under the bus to save his own skin. "So you are saying your wife forced you to steal the credit card?" "No, well, not physically," Kyle stammered, his eyes darting around the room. "But the emotional pressure. You do not know what it is like living with the Williams family. They expect the best. They demand luxury. I was just trying to keep up. I was a victim of their expectations. I did it for her. You should be arresting her too." I read the transcript of this interrogation days later, and that part made me pause. He was willing to destroy his wife to save himself from a weekend in a holding cell. It was a pathetic display of character, or lack thereof, confirming everything I had ever suspected about the man my sister married. While Kyle was busy betraying his marriage vows in a concrete cell, my family was facing their own version of hell back at the Azure Coast Resort. The flashing lights of the police cruisers had faded, leaving Bianca, my mother, and my father standing on the sidewalk like discarded luggage. They turned to go back inside, desperate to retreat to the privacy of room 1204 to regroup and panic in peace. But as they approached the sliding glass doors, they found their path blocked once again. This time, it was the night manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, who held a clipboard like a shield. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," she said, her voice cutting through the humid night air. "I am afraid I cannot allow you to return to your room." "My mother." Patricia straightened her spine, trying to summon the ghost of her dignity. "Excuse me. We are guests here. We have paid for that room. My son-in-law just had a misunderstanding with the police, but that has nothing to do with us. We are tired and we are going upstairs." Mrs. Gable did not move. Resort policy is strictly clear regarding criminal activity. Since the credit card used to secure your reservation was also flagged for fraud during the initial attempt, and the guest associated with your party has been arrested for felony theft on the premises, we are exercising our right to evict you, effective immediately. Your keys have been deactivated. My father Desmond stepped forward, his face gray with exhaustion. "Evicted. But it is 2 in the morning. We have nowhere to go. Our luggage is in that room. Your luggage has been packed by our security team and is currently waiting for you at the bell stand," Mrs. Gable replied, pointing to a sad pile of suitcases near the curb. "You are no longer welcome on the property. Please remove your belongings and leave." Bianca let out a shriek. "But we have no car." Kyle had the keys to the rental in his pocket when they took him. "We have no money. You cannot just throw us on the street. We have children." Mrs. Gable's expression softened slightly, but only just. "You may wait in the outer lobby seating area until you can arrange transportation, but you may not enter the guest elevators, the restaurants, or the pool area. Security will be watching." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving them stranded in the very place they had come to conquer. They dragged their heavy suitcases into the waiting area, a small alcove near the valet stand, with uncomfortable wooden benches designed to discourage loitering. The irony was sharp enough to cut. Hours ago, they had strutted through this lobby like royalty. Now they were refugees in designer clothes. The hours of the night dragged on with agonizing slowness. The air conditioning in the lobby was set to a frigid temperature, chilling them to the bone. Bianca huddled under her thin silk shawl, the wine stain on her dress stiff and sticky, smelling of stale alcohol. She scrolled through her phone, frantically checking her bank balances, hoping to find a forgotten stash of cash, but finding only overdraft fees and negative numbers. My mother sat on the hard bench, her posture finally collapsing. She looked old. The makeup she had carefully applied for dinner had settled into the lines of her face. She looked at my father, waiting for him to fix it, but Desmond Williams had checked out. He sat with his head in his hands, staring at his Italian loafers, realizing that his retirement was likely going to be liquidated to pay for a criminal defense lawyer. Around 3 in the morning, the night cleaning crew arrived. A team of workers with industrial vacuums and floor buffers moved through the lobby. They were people my family would have ignored or looked down upon just yesterday. But tonight, the dynamic was reversed. The workers paused to look at the family huddled in the corner. They whispered to each other in Spanish, shaking their heads. I could only imagine what they were saying. Look at those rich people brought low. Look at the mess they made. My mother caught the eye of a woman emptying the trash cans. The woman did not look away. She stared at my mother with a look of raw, unfiltered judgment. There was no envy in her eyes, only pity. My mother pulled her legs up onto the bench, trying to make herself smaller, trying to hide from the gaze of the working-class woman who at that moment had more dignity and freedom than the entire Williams clan combined. The silence of the lobby was broken only by the hum of the floor polisher and the occasional sniffle from Bianca. Why isn't Zara answering? Bianca whispered into the darkness, her voice sounding small and broken. She has to know. She has to know we are here. Why does she not care? My father lifted his head slowly. Because we taught her not to, he said, his voice raspy. We spent 30 years teaching her that she did not matter. Why are you surprised that she finally learned the lesson? The words hung in the cold air, heavier than the suitcases they could not afford to move. For the first time, the truth was sitting on the bench with them, uninvited and undeniable. They were not the victims of a cruel sister. They were the architects of their own destruction, and the foundation had just crumbled. As the sun began to rise over the Atlantic, painting the sky in mocking shades of pink and orange, my family watched the dawn break, not from a balcony suite, but from the hard, unforgiving seats of public humiliation, waiting for a morning that promised nothing but more pain. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel lobby, exposing the grim reality of the Williams family. After a sleepless night spent huddled on hard wooden benches, my mother, father, and sister looked nothing like the high society figures they pretended to be. Bianca's silk dress was wrinkled and stained with dried wine. My father's eyes were bloodshot, staring vacantly at a spot on the carpet. My mother, Patricia, was trying to fix her hair in the reflection of a glass display case, frantically attempting to salvage some scrap of dignity before the day began. They were exhausted, hungry, and smelling faintly of desperation. Just as Bianca was about to burst into another round of tears about her phone battery dying, a shadow fell across them. It was not the security guard who had been watching them all night like a hawk. It was a young woman in a crisp navy blazer, holding a tablet with an air of absolute authority. She introduced herself as the executive assistant to the board of directors. My family perked up instantly. The title sounded important. It sounded like a solution. The assistant informed them that they were requested upstairs immediately for a meeting to discuss the incident and the status of Mr. Davis. A wave of relief washed over them, so visible it was almost pathetic. They looked at each other, the same delusion taking root in their minds simultaneously. It was Zara. It had to be. They convinced themselves that I had finally come to my senses. They told themselves that I had likely pulled some strings, called in favors from my imaginary sugar daddy, or begged my boss to intervene. My mother's posture straightened instantly. She smoothed down her skirt and turned to Bianca with a knowing look. See, she whispered, her voice raspy but triumphant. "I told you she would fix it. She was just throwing a tantrum. She probably paid the bail and is waiting upstairs to apologize for letting it go this far." The elevator ride up to the top floor was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. Instead of feeling shame for the criminal chaos they had caused, my mother began rehearsing her lecture. She muttered under her breath, preparing the words she would use to scold me. She planned to tell me how selfish I was for turning off my phone, how I had humiliated the family, and how I would need to work extra shifts to pay back whatever fines they had incurred. Bianca chimed in, fixing her smudged eyeliner, saying that she expected me to upgrade their room to the penthouse as an apology for the distress I had caused her children. They were rising physically in the elevator, but morally, they were still digging themselves deeper into a hole they did not even know they were in. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level, opening into a private foyer that smelled of fresh lilies and money. They stepped out, chins held high, ready to accept my apology and reclaim their vacation. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom where the judge, jury, and executioner were all the same person, and she was done showing mercy. The heavy double doors of the boardroom were made of solid mahogany, polished to a mirror shine that reflected their disheveled appearances back at them. The assistant pushed the doors open, and the family stepped inside. The room was massive, dominated by a 30-foot table made of single-slab walnut. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the ocean that made their previous view of the laundry vent seem like a bad joke. But it was not the view that stopped them in their tracks. It was the people in the room. Standing near the window were two men in dark suits. One was Mr. Sterling, the general manager of the resort, a man they had demanded to see multiple times the night before, but were told was unavailable. The other was a man they did not know, but whose sharp features and briefcase screamed high-priced legal counsel. And then there was me. I was sitting at the very head of the table facing the door. I was not wearing the hoodie and leggings they were used to seeing me in. I was not wearing the uniform of a call center employee. I was wearing a bespoke cream-colored power suit that cost more than my father's car. My hair was pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. On my wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch that caught the morning light. I did not stand up when they entered. I did not smile. I did not look relieved to see them. I simply sat there, my hands clasped on the leather folder in front of me, watching them with the detached interest of a scientist observing specimens in a jar. My family froze near the entrance, confused by the tableau. They expected a weeping daughter, or perhaps a subservient one standing in the corner. Instead, they found a queen holding court. The silence stretched out heavy and uncomfortable. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, not to greet them but to walk over to me. He picked up a crystal pitcher of water and poured a glass for me with a level of deference that was unmistakable. "Thank you, Sterling," I said, my voice calm and echoing slightly in the large room. The sight of the resort's general manager serving me water like a waiter caused a glitch in my mother's brain. She blinked rapidly, trying to process the image, but her arrogance overrode her confusion. She stepped forward, ignoring the two men, and zeroed in on me. My mother could not stand the silence anymore. The cognitive dissonance shattered, replaced by her default setting of rage. She marched toward the end of the table, her finger pointed accusingly at me. "Zara Williams," she screeched, her voice cracking with lack of sleep. "What is the meaning of this theater? Do you have any idea what we have been through? Your brother-in-law is in a jail cell. We slept on a bench. A bench, Zara. And you are sitting here playing dress-up in someone else's office. Fix this immediately. Tell these people to release Kyle and get us a room. I expect a serious apology for this behavior." She slammed her hand down on the table, expecting me to flinch. I did not blink. Before I could even open my mouth, the man with the briefcase stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it had the sharp cutting edge of a guillotine. "Sit down, Mrs. Williams," the lawyer said, "and show some respect. You are addressing the third largest shareholder of the Helios Group and the primary owner of this resort property." The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother's mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. She looked from the lawyer to me, then back to the lawyer. She looked at Mr. Sterling, waiting for him to laugh to say it was a joke. But Mr. Sterling just nodded solemnly. "I beg your pardon, my father," whispered his voice trembling. "You heard him, Desmond?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "You are not standing in a hotel conference room. You are standing in my boardroom. This hotel, the golf course, the villa, it is mine. Or at least 15% of it is, which gives me controlling interest in daily operations." Bianca let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "That is a lie. That is a total lie. You work at a call center. You answer phones for a living. I have seen your pay stubs. You send them to us when we need loans." I shook my head slowly, a small, pitying smile playing on my lips. "I sent you fabricated documents, Bianca. I created a dummy email address and a fake HR profile so you would think I was making $40,000 a year. Because I knew if you knew I was making $4 million a year, you would have bled me dry long ago. The call center job was a cover. While you were mocking me for working double shifts, I was closing acquisitions in Tokyo and London." My mother grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "But the discount, the employee discount. It is an owner's privilege code, Patricia," I corrected her. "I labeled it employee discount so you would not ask questions. I let you stay here for pennies on the dollar for years. I let you drink my champagne and eat at my restaurants while you looked down on me. I wanted to see if you would ever treat me with respect just because I was your daughter, not because of what I could buy you." I stood up, then placing my hands on the table. The movement made them all flinch. "And yesterday I got my answer, didn't I? When you thought I was poor, you left me in a lobby. You told me to sleep on a floor. You let your husband call me a bellboy. You showed me exactly who you are." The realization hit them like a physical blow. The color drained from Bianca's face as she replayed every insult, every sneer, every demand she had made over the last decade. She realized that the person she had been treating like a servant was actually the queen of the kingdom she was desperate to be part of. My father looked sick. He looked at the luxury around him, realizing that all of this could have been shared with them if they had just been decent human beings. So I continued, my voice hardening. "We are not here to discuss my apology. We are here to discuss the fact that your husband stole from me. And unlike the imaginary manager you thought you could bully, I do not make threats I do not keep." My mother looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in her life. She did not see the disappointment she had labeled me as. She saw a stranger. A powerful, terrifying stranger who happened to have her eyes. And for the first time, Patricia Williams was genuinely afraid. My mother was still staring at me with that look of terrified realization when I reached into my leather portfolio. I did not say a word. I pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope that was sealed with red tape. I held it up for a moment, letting them see the weight of it before I tossed it onto the center of the walnut table. It landed with a loud thud that made everyone jump except for the lawyer and Mr. Sterling, who stood like statues by the window. "That file contains the report from a private investigator I hired 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You see, when Kyle started asking me for loans to cover his business expansion, I got suspicious. Real estate developers do not usually ask their call center sister-in-law for $10,000 unless they are desperate, so I looked into him. And what I found was not a business expansion, it was a crater." Bianca reached for the file, her hands trembling so badly she could barely undo the string. She pulled out the stack of papers, and the first thing that fell out was a foreclosure notice. I narrated what she was seeing because I wanted my parents to hear every detail. "Your husband is not a successful developer, Bianca. He is a gambling addict. He has racked up $200,000 in debt at casinos in Atlantic City and online sports betting sites. He has leveraged your house 3 times. You do not own that colonial anymore. The bank does, and they are starting eviction proceedings next month." Bianca gasped, flipping through the pages frantically. "No," she whispered. "That is not true. He told me the market was just slow. He said we were waiting on a big closing." The closing he was waiting on was this weekend, I continued. Did you know why he really wanted to come on this trip? It was not to celebrate Mom and Dad's anniversary, it was to corner them. He planned to convince Mom and Dad to sell their house, the one I bought for them, but put in their name to pay off his bookie. He was going to liquidate their retirement to save his own skin. My father made a choking sound, staring at the foreclosure notice. He was going to sell our home. He was going to put us on the street. But that is not the worst part, I said. Keep reading, Bianca. Look at the last page. Bianca turned the page. Clipped to the back was a series of photographs. They showed Kyle sitting in a park in Atlanta. He was holding hands with a woman who was definitely not Bianca. And playing on the swing set next to them was a toddler who looked exactly like Kyle. A scream tore out of Bianca's throat. It was a primal, animalistic sound of pure heartbreak. She stared at the photo of the little boy who had Kyle's chin and Kyle's eyes. He has a second family in Georgia, I said quietly. He has been funneling the money he stole from our parents and the money he borrowed from credit cards to support them. That is why he is always on business trips. That is why he is always broke. He is not investing. He is maintaining a double life. Bianca collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the photo to her chest. My mother stood up, ready to comfort her, but she stopped when she saw the look on my face. She realized I was not done. I had destroyed Kyle, but I had plenty of ammunition left for the people who enabled him. I waited for Bianca's wails to subside into a low whimpering before I turned my attention to my parents. They looked horrified, acting as if they were innocent victims in Kyle's web of lies. But I knew better. I knew that evil thrives when good people turn a blind eye, and my parents had been blind by choice for a decade. I reached into my portfolio again. This time I pulled out a binder. It was neatly tabbed and color-coded. I slid it across the polished wood toward my father. "You look shocked, Desmond," I said, using his first name again. "You look disgusted by what Kyle did. But why? You are no better than he is." My father looked up, his eyes wet with tears. "How can you say that? We are victims here too. He was going to sell our house." I pointed at the binder. "Open it. That is a forensic accounting of every single dollar I have sent you over the last 10 years. Every check for your heart medication, every transfer for the roof repair, every cash gift for Christmas. It totals just over $500,000, $500,000 that I earned while you thought I was answering phones for minimum wage." I stood up and walked around the table, pacing slowly behind them like a shark circling its prey. "I gave you that money because I wanted you to be secure. I wanted you to have a peaceful retirement. I thought I was paying for your health insurance and your groceries, but when I audited your accounts last week, do you know what I found?" I stopped behind my mother's chair and leaned down, whispering into her ear. "I found that you have been acting as a money laundering service for the Golden Child." I walked back to the head of the table. Turned to tab 3, Dad. Look at the entry for November 15th. I sent you $5,000 for emergency dental surgery. 2 days later, you transferred $4,500 to Bianca. The memo line says for the twins' private school tuition. But the twins go to public school. That money went to a Louis Vuitton store in the mall. I have the receipt. My mother went pale. She tried to stammer an excuse. Bianca needed a pick-me-up. She was depressed. We were just helping her. You were stealing from me to fund her vanity, I snapped. Tab 4. January. I sent $10,000 for a new furnace. You spent $800 on a space heater and gave the rest to Kyle for a down payment on his lease because his credit was shot. You took money meant to keep you warm and used it to help a con man look rich. My father flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. He saw the truth laid out in black and white. 10 years of sacrifice from me. 10 years of enabling from them. They had taken my sweat and blood and poured it into a bottomless pit of greed. You knew, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. You knew I was working double shifts. You knew I was driving a beat-up car. You let me struggle. You let me scrimp and save, thinking I was barely getting by. And yet you took every cent I offered and gave it to the daughter who treats you like dirt. Why? Because she is pretty. Because she married a white man. Because she fits your image of success better than I do. My father closed the binder. He could not look at me. He stared at his hands, the shame radiating off him in waves. He slumped in his chair, looking small and defeated. He realized that the daughter he ignored was the only thing keeping a roof over his head, and the daughter he worshipped had been helping her husband dismantle his life. There was a long silence in the room. The only sound was the air conditioning and Bianca's soft crying. I walked back to my chair at the head of the table and sat down. I smoothed the lapel of my jacket. I took a sip of water. I was done shouting. Now it was time for sentencing. I looked at the lawyer and nodded. He opened his briefcase and pulled out 3 legal documents, placing them on the table in front of my family. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "First, regarding Kyle, the police have contacted me. They are offering a plea deal if I drop the grand larceny charges. They want to know if I will post bail or offer a character reference." I looked at Bianca, who looked up with a glimmer of hope in her swollen eyes. "I have instructed my legal team to reject all requests for leniency," I said. "I will not be posting bail. I will not be dropping charges. I will be testifying against him. He is going to prison, Bianca. And since you are listed as a co-signer on his fraudulent loans, you might want to find a very cheap lawyer because you are about to be investigated for conspiracy." Bianca put her head down on the table and wailed. Second, I continued, turning to my parents. "The financial aid stops today. The bank accounts you have access to have already been closed. The credit cards have been canceled. There will be no more checks, no more emergency funds. You are on your own." My mother started to cry. "But Zara, how will we survive? Your father's pension is tiny. We have bills." "That brings me to the third point," I said, pointing to the last document. "The house. The house you live in. The house you raised me in. The house you allowed Kyle to nearly steal. Technically, that house is in your name, but I hold the deed because I paid the mortgage off. I have been letting you live there rent-free for 5 years, but I am afraid that arrangement is no longer working for me." My father looked up, terror in his eyes. "Zara, please, do not do this. It is our home. It is my asset," I corrected him. "And I have decided to liquidate it. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. I have already listed it with a realtor. I suggest you use that time to pack. Maybe Bianca can help you, since she will need a place to stay too once the bank takes her house. You can all get a nice 2-bedroom apartment together. You can be the close-knit family you always pretended to be." My mother stood up, her face twisting with fury. "You cannot do this. You are ungrateful. You are cruel. I gave birth to you, and I have paid for that privilege 1,000,000 times over," I said, standing up to signal the meeting was over. Mr. Sterling stepped forward. "Security will escort you off the property now. Your belongings are at the curb. Please do not return to the Azure Coast Resort. You are permanently banned from all Helios properties globally." I turned my back on them and walked toward the window, looking out at the ocean. I heard the chairs scrape against the floor. I heard Bianca sobbing. I heard my father's heavy footsteps. I heard my mother shouting insults until the heavy doors closed, cutting off her voice. I stood there alone in the silence of the boardroom. I watched down below as 4 small figures were led out of the hotel entrance by security. They looked like ants from up here. Insignificant. Small. I took a deep breath. It did not feel like happiness. It felt like surgery. Painful, bloody, but absolutely necessary to cut out the cancer that had been killing me for 30 years. I checked my watch. I had a board meeting in 10 minutes to discuss the expansion. I smoothed my suit, turned away from the window, and went back to work. I had an empire to build, and for the first time in my life, I was building it just for me. Here is the continuation of the script focusing on Part 12, written for a seamless AI voiceover experience. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the boardroom, looking down at the circular driveway of the resort entrance. From 12 stories up, my family looked like small, chaotic insects scurrying under the magnifying glass of the South Carolina sun. Security had escorted them to the curb where their luggage was piled in a haphazard heap. They looked stripped of all the pretense and arrogance they had walked in with just 24 hours ago. Down on the pavement, I saw a taxi pull up. It was not a limousine or a luxury sedan, but a beat-up yellow cab that looked like it had seen better days. At that moment, another vehicle pulled up behind the taxi. It was a bail bondsman car, and out stepped Kyle. He had been released on bail, pending his arraignment, likely having used his one phone call to drain the last of his own secret emergency cash. When Bianca saw him, the scene turned from a tragedy into a brawl. I could not hear them through the thick, soundproof glass, but I saw the body language clearly. Bianca did not run to her husband for comfort. She lunged at him. She was screaming, her face twisted in a mask of pure fury. She struck him across the chest with her purse, swinging it like a weapon. I watched as my sister, the woman who prided herself on being the picture of elegance, clawed at her husband's face in broad daylight in front of the valet staff and the guests she had tried so hard to impress. Kyle tried to shield himself, cowering against the door of the bail bond car, but Bianca was relentless, fueled by the betrayal of the secret family and the gambling debt that had ruined her life. My father tried to intervene, pulling Bianca back, but he looked frail and defeated. And then I saw my mother. Patricia Williams turned away from the fight and looked up. She looked right at the glass tower. She knew I was up there. For a moment, I thought she would just leave, but old habits die hard. She broke away from the group and ran toward the automatic doors. I watched as she argued with the security guard stationed there. I could imagine what she was saying. She was probably demanding to speak to me one last time, probably claiming she could talk some sense into me, probably thinking she could manipulate me with guilt, like she had done 1,000 times before. But the guard did not budge. He simply pointed to the curb. My mother stood there for a long moment, hitting her hand against the glass, a silent pantomime of desperation, before she finally slumped her shoulders and walked back to the taxi. They loaded their bags in silence. No one held the door for anyone else. They piled into the cramped cab, a broken family with no home to go back to and no one left to blame but themselves. As the taxi pulled away, merging into the traffic, leaving the island, I did not feel a pang of regret. I felt the surgical precision of a necessary amputation. The limb was gone, but the body could finally heal. I turned away from the window and walked back to the walnut table. The room was quiet, the air still charged with the energy of the confrontation, but settling now into a professional calm. Mr. Sterling and the lawyer were waiting patiently. They did not ask about my family. They did not offer pity. They offered me a pen. It was a heavy silver fountain pen, the kind used for momentous occasions. On the table lay the final contracts for the golf course expansion and the new Marine Conservation Trust. I picked up the pen. My hand felt steady. For years, every time I signed a check or a document, I felt the weight of my family on my wrist. I felt the phantom pressure of their needs, their debts, and their expectations. I always wondered if I was saving enough, if I was doing enough to earn their love. But as I touched the nib to the paper, that weight was gone. I was just Zara. I was not a daughter seeking approval. I was not a sister seeking validation. I was a businesswoman making a decision that would shape the future of this coast. I signed my name. I signed Zara Williams. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and permanent. "Congratulations, Ms. Williams," Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder. "This is a historic day for the Helios Group." "Thank you, Sterling," I replied, handing the pen back. "It is a historic day for me, too." I gathered my things. I did not need to rush back to a cramped apartment. I did not need to pick up an extra shift at a call center. I did not need to answer a frantic text about a utility bill. The silence in my head was profound. It was the silence of a ledger that had finally been balanced. I walked out of the boardroom, not as a victim who had survived, but as a victor who had conquered. The elevator ride down felt different this time. It did not feel like an escape. It felt like an arrival. I walked through the lobby, the same lobby where I had been humiliated the day before. The staff nodded at me with respect. The guests went about their vacation unaware that the woman walking past them in the cream suit had just dismantled her entire personal life to save her future. I walked out to the valet stand where David was waiting with the Bentley. He opened the door and I slid in. "Take me back to the villa, David," I said. "I have one more call to make." Back at the enclave, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of violent orange and soft purple. I sat on the balcony, the ocean breeze tangling my hair. I pulled out my phone, which had been blissfully silent since I blocked them all. I dialed a number that I knew by heart. The video call connected after 2 rings. The face of an 80-year-old woman filled the screen. Her skin was like cracked leather, but her eyes were sharp and bright. It was Grandma Hattie, my father's mother, the only person in the family who had ever seen me. She lived in a small paid-off house in Georgia, miles away from the pretension of my parents. "Hi, Grandma," I said, my voice finally cracking just a little. "Hey, baby girl," she said, peering at the screen. "You look different. You look lighter." I told her everything. I told her about the hotel room. I told her about the stolen card. I told her about Kyle's secret life and the foreclosure. I told her that I had cut them off, that I had evicted them, that I had chosen me. I waited for her to scold me. I waited for her to tell me that blood is thicker than water, that I should have been more charitable. Instead, Grandma Hattie threw her head back and laughed. It was a rich, deep sound that came from her belly. "Lord have mercy," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "It is about time, Zara. I have been praying for you to wake up for 10 years. Those leeches were never going to stop sucking until you slapped them off." "You are not mad?" I asked, feeling the last shred of guilt evaporate. "Mad," she scoffed. "Baby, I am proud. You stood tall. You protected what you built. Your grandfather is looking down right now, and he is high-fiving the angels. You did good. Now promise me one thing." "Anything, Grandma. Do not look back," she said, her voice turning serious. You looked back at Lot's wife and she turned to a pillar of salt. You keep your eyes on the horizon. This is your life, Zara. Live it. I hung up the phone, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the setting sun. I stood up and walked to the railing. Below me, the waves crashed against the shore, relentless and powerful, washing away the footprints in the sand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the salt air. I was alone in a big house, but I was not lonely. I was free. I looked directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall for the first time. They say you cannot choose your family. That is a lie. You can choose who gets a seat at your table. You can choose who gets access to your peace. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to fire the people who treat your heart like a part-time job. I turned my face to the wind, letting it blow my hair back, watching the lights of the resort flicker on in the distance. I was Zara Williams, owner, survivor, and finally free. The screen fades to black as the sound of the ocean swells, masking the final text that appears on the screen. Never apologize for refusing to be mistreated. This experience taught me that shared DNA does not entitle anyone to your dignity. For years, I believed that enduring disrespect was the price of admission for family love, paying for their affection with my silence and my wallet. I was wrong. I learned that you cannot heal in the same environment that broke you, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. True family isn't defined by obligation, but by mutual respect. My worth is not a negotiation, and my peace is no longer for sale. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience. Have you ever had to cut ties to find your peace? Let me know your story in the comments below.